First Class Fatherhood. That is where Alec Lace comes in with his popular podcast.
And one of the most interesting was on a podcast.
Alec Lace interviews high-profile fathers from actors to NFL players with a vision to change the narrative of fatherhood and family life.
Joining me now, First Class Father, Tommy Aceto. Welcome to First Class Fatherhood.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you here. I've been looking forward to this. So let's start like this. How many kids do you have and how old are they?
I have 4 kids. They are 12, 10, and twin 7-year-olds. We adopted the twin 7-year-olds.
Very cool. So if you could here, Tommy, just take a second to hit my listeners with a little bit about your background and what you do.
I was a Navy SEAL medic for 16 years. Before that, I was an NCAA soccer player and a state champ wrestler out of Michigan. I wanted to be a pediatrician since I was 6 years old, and that didn't work out. Found myself in the SEAL teams right after college. I enlisted. A teammate of mine told me about the SEAL teams. I told him he was crazy, and he said I was crazy, and I said, you're right, and that was about it. And so I went through BUD's training and found that life kind of prepared me pretty well for the SEAL teams. I was always in a team or in a fraternity, and I was always in athletics. And so I just really did well, I think, in the beginning with where I was. It gave me identity. I mean, you put a trident on your chest and you could become bulletproof. And so there was a lot of purpose and a lot of work. And I think after 16 years, I didn't realize the toll that it took on my mind and my moral compass and my kind of, I call it programming. But I got out after 16 years. It wasn't pretty. I had a really gnarly divorce. It hasn't been resolved. My ex-wife used the court system and the fact that I was a Navy SEAL and basically made up a story that I was abusive and a drug addict, and she was scared for her life. So without much evidence or any evidence, I faced the California court system as a combat SEAL, and I don't think I was prepared for what I was going in for, and I got my ass handed to me in court, and I basically lost my medical retirement, my kids, and my Trident in 10 days after 16 years.
Wow. That's incredible. And I'll tell you what, if I get one email more than any other I get from dads across the country that listen to the show here, it's usually emails that start like that about how they got their ass handed to them in the court. The family court system in this country is heavily tilted against the fathers. And we're going to get into that more in just a second here. And I would say, I've known a lot of pediatricians over the years with my kids. None of them seemed like they could make it through BUD. So that's quite a switch to go from wanting to be a pediatrician. And I know the first time I met you, I felt like I was going through my own hell week. I was going through a heat stroke situation there. I was in a 3-piece suit in 100-degree weather, and I didn't know if I was going to make it or not. But I'm grateful for your service. I love what you do. So take me back to the beginning of this story here, Tommy. How old were you when you first became a dad, and how did that experience shift your perspective on life?
Yeah. So like I said, I wanted to be a baby doctor. So I always had a passion for kids. I think it was the innocence that really did it for me. Just that, when you're a kid, it's, you're not stained by life and all the conflict involved. And so there's just that innocence. And so when I had my kids, and the story kind of gets crazier, and probably be a book or a movie or something someday. I hate to admit that, but this lady that I married was connected to high level people, and she didn't tell me who she was, and so I had a lot of. She basically used me to have kids. That's the long and the short of it. And I didn't really want to look at the situation I was in because I was occupied being a SEAL and being deployed, and you're gone 10 months out of the year anyway. So it was something that really affected me. I loved having kids. I raised them from the beginning, and up with them all night and doing the bottle thing and taking them to bike rides, and I had a chance to take my two boys, my oldest ones, to the White House on a private tour before Christmas 2016. I was there at this program called the NICO. It's a head trauma center. So being an explosive guy, I had my bell rung a few times, and a couple really gnarly falls out of a plane, and so I was there at this Walter Reed Hospital getting 3 weeks of medical stuff done. It was pretty cool. It's like Jason Bourne medicine, Eastern Western medicine, and my wife, because she was connected to the Clintons, I didn't know this, but she got me in, and I had a private tour of the White House with my two boys. So that's something I always cherish. I remember holding them up in my arms in front of the Abraham Lincoln portrait in that fireplace. And yeah, it's hard. So I haven't really talked to them in a long time because I'm still going through this custody battle. But
when did the curtain come up here, Tommy? Like you say, you were taken for a ride here. You didn't know who she was. When was the aha moment, or when did you feel like, man, I've been had? Like, how did that kind of play out?
Yeah, so early on, my parents kind of did some research, and they said they didn't think she was who she said she was. She was in Hollywood, and she was a songwriter, and so I just didn't want to look at it. And I asked her family. They all lied to me, and so I kind of knew, but I didn't want to know, kind of thing. They didn't tell me. And so years went on, and then what happened was at the end of the career, she told the command that I was smoking marijuana. I was smoking marijuana, but I quit. I went to a biblical PTSD clinic called Mighty Oaks, and I went there for 2 weeks. I gave it up, and because I was on medication that the Navy gave me, and it wasn't working. The pills weren't working. I was actually having more suicidal ideations from the SSRIs and all the pills that they push, and so I decided to try to self-medicate. I was reading about the benefits of marijuana, and I was at a point in my career where I was already getting out because I was going through a medical board for medical retirement. It got approved, and at that time, the marriage was dissolving. The kids were in constant, just toxic environment, and I guess I wasn't smart enough to walk away. I was so determined to fix whatever it was in my family, and that's probably the product of my training. But I think I was blinded by my own ego and what I thought needed to happen and how I could fix my family. That there was nothing to really fix because she used me to have kids. So that was that. But at the end, my CO, who basically said, your decision for your medical retirement's been revoked, and I suggest you prepare because she's coming after you. And I was like, what? And so that was how I left the Navy after 16 years. And at that time, he was right. She had it all set up and put a restraining order on me, which is standard protocol for a lot of women. And the more I looked into this, I started hearing about guys that this happened to as well. And I was like, I'll be damned. Like, kind of made me feel good that I wasn't the only one, but it made me realize like how big this problem is. And so 50 grand later, they knocked she was going for a 5-year restraining order. I got 3 years. The thing that she called the cops on was my kid threw a shoe at my back. I was like, we're going to have to spank him because we were going through, do we spank, do we not spank? And then I said, no, he can't throw a shoe at the middle of my back. My sciatic was out at the time, so he like nailed it. And it was because we were fighting. And so I went over to him, I grabbed him by the foot, and I pulled him out, and I gave him 3 spankings over his jeans, because I knew she was going to call the cops. And she did, and they came, and I told them what happened, and it was nothing ever happened. But she would build these cases of me. She would morph the truth and basically get child services involved. And then, they have a case and no proof, just a case. And, they always side with the safety of the child. And so looking back, I could have handled this a hell of a lot different, but I didn't know. And so that's how it happened.
Yeah, and Tommy, unfortunately, these type of stories are a dime a dozen, and not to lessen your situation. I remember I had Sean Parnell on here. He's a former Army Ranger. He wrote the book Outlaw Platoon. He was in a very similar situation where his a wife pulled all these kind of tricks out of the hat and took his kids away. And then what happens here too, Tommy, is once you're not in the relationship with the kids, they control the narrative of who you are, and so they have the ability to tell them and create this person that you are, and that they take in their mind as the truth and who you really are. So it's hard to kind of win that back once you get that mindset in one direction. But when is the last time that you did get a chance to speak to your kids? And if you could speak to them right now, what would you tell them?
Yeah, the last time I saw them or spoke to them or had any information about them was Father's Day 2019. Yeah. And then I went to get my stuff. She, of course, had the police there, and I told them what was going on. And so they let me go through the house, and I left a card for my son under his pillow. I said, this isn't your fault, and I know you don't understand, but I love you, and we'll get through this. And she used that in the courts as a breach in my restraining order. And stuff like that. Like I would have my friends grab them, gifts for Christmas, and she would use that as a, tampering with it, and stupid stuff. But the thing is, I'm a very spiritual man, and I believe God has his hand in this. And I got to the point where having an incredible wife, living in Music City, writing music, helping people get over addictions, learning about this incredible psychedelic medicine and how it's helping our veterans and our, all kinds of people. And I wouldn't be here, I don't think, if I didn't go through that. The pain became my passion. It's become my fuel.
Wow. Well, I mean, God bless you, Tommy. And I pray to God that this works out in a chance where you'll get a chance to reconnect with your kids and build that relationship back. And I know that obviously you've been through a lot of trauma in your life. We see Navy SEALs on TV, and we just think that they're superhumans. And when you get around these guys, you realize just how human you guys are, and you're susceptible to all this stuff. And I know I listened. I had Sean Ryan on the podcast here, and I started listening to some of his interviews. He did one with DJ Shipley, who talked about going to NICO and getting involved with psychedelic medication that helped him with this. And I know it's something that you're involved in, so I kind of wanted to steer it over to this, if I could. When did you first become aware of this psychedelic medicine, and is it what they're saying that it is? Is this some type of thing that can really help, not only just with PTSD, but civilians who have gone through some type of personal trauma in their own life?
Yeah. So I know DJ. I met him in Iraq, actually. He was a couple classes ahead of me. I was in 252. I think he was in like 247 or something. Anyways, yeah, the medicine found me at the end, right as I was getting out of the Navy. I lost everything. I lost my family, my career, my identity. And a good friend that I went through training with, his name was Johnny Wilson. He started a nonprofit called SEAL Future Fund. And he was working with Marcus Capone at the time, and Dr. Martin Palenko and some other people. And, you just realized that he said, hey, we're doing this stuff. We're doing psychedelics. And I was like, you guys are doing psychedelics? You didn't tell me? And, but he's like, this ain't the kind that you don't take this for fun. This is like this, you might think you died. And I was like, what? So without a lot of background, I talked to Dr. Martin on the phone. And I just got out. They were waiting for me to get out because they didn't want me to do it while I was in. And so right as I got out, I went to this beautiful mansion in Rancho Santa Fe with a Vietnam SEAL that came with me. He actually blindfolded me as we drove to the site. And I'm like, I did intelligence. Like, I get it. Like, I'm like, oh, this is role playing. But and then I went there. There was a MD. And his wife was a healer, like a shaman. And they said, welcome to our home. And they kind of gave me a couple of minutes to relax, he sat on this bed, and it was a little like, woo-woo-ish, or a lot of woo-woo, earthy kind of stuff. And I'm a Christian background. I was going to mass with Jim Caviezel and Mike Sweeney from the Royals, John Lynch and Rancho Santa Fe. So like to come down the road and to do this toad, which was 5-MeO DMT, comes from a toad. And I was like, all right, what do I do? And they're like, well, you're going to let all your air out, and you're going to suck this stuff through through a high-end crack pipe, and you're just going to let that medicine get in there and hold it and then let it go. And so I took a massive hit of this stuff, and it was exactly what, if you ever interviewed Marcus Capone, it was kind of like him, where I just, like, everything in my body just cringed and fought. And that was my nervous system. That was my ego. That was my training. And after 2 rounds of this, I thought they were euthanizing me. I thought the government came in, I was damaged goods, and that this is the way I had to go out. And I was so much pain from not seeing my kids that I was just like, I don't want to do it anymore. So I let my breath go, and boom, I like clicked in and saw this glow. And that's what they call the meeting God thing. It's very common with this medicine, but my story was my story. It's like everyone's different. And so that was the first time. I did it a couple more times. The second time, I surrendered the second time and went into the body of Christ. Like, insane stuff, this stuff we're doing. But what we're finding is that there is an incredible reset neurologically that's happening. In fact, Stanford is studying our protocol right now, and there's about 144 different psilocybin, which is the mushroom research research projects going on right now, just with the psilocybin. So the research is in. This stuff does work, but like I say, the medicine should be a tool that you use to heal yourself, because the true medicine is inside our nervous system. It's dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and that balance of cortisol, which drives you into fear and survival mode and sympathetic lock, we call it. And that's kind of what PTSD is sympathetic lock.
And it seems like you said there, everything that we need to heal ourselves is already inside of us. And this is a vehicle that gives us access to all that stuff. And I've heard this. It seems like it's becoming more and more mainstream, or more popular. I know Joe Rogan talks about it quite a bit on his show. I've heard more and more people talking about it. How quick do you think? And obviously, we talk about the military. There's 22 suicides a day. We hear this all the time.
Way
about
more.
Veterans. More, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So how quick are we looking at fast tracking this thing, Tommy, where this could become something that's at a local, where you don't have to go to Mexico, or you don't have to go to some crazy, psychiatric place to get access to this stuff? How soon are we looking at the timetable here before this becomes down the corner for the local veteran at the VA?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to get to. I went and spoke at the biggest psychedelic conference in Miami a couple weekends ago, called Wonderland, and Rick Dublin, the guy that's basically responsible for getting veterans this treatment legal, he runs an organization called MAPS out of San Francisco or San Jose. They're like the umbrella psychedelic organization, and he was a dang draft dodger in Vietnam, and he's like, how crazy is it that I went from all this shame and being a draft dodger to helping veterans heal and their families. And so him and guys like Paul Stamets was there, the mushroom guy, who was Joe Rogan's #1 guest on his podcast. And I talked to them, and the veterans are the voice for the medicine. We are the voice. So if there's anyone out there that's watching this, veteran or not, it's on us. If we got some sort of relief or benefit or reset and it's helped us, we have to help others, just like you're doing with this awareness of fatherless homes. It's all about the awareness.
Yeah, and Tommy, as far as obviously we're talking here primarily about military guys, combat veterans, stuff like that. But is this stuff is it the same thing as women who have been through sexual trauma, boys that have been abused as kids, childhood traumas that civilians can't get over? Is it going to work that way as well, mainstream civilians?
Yeah, we all have the same hardware. All of our perspectives on life is different. The hardware is the nervous system. And the thing is, in modern science and in medicine, it's all physical medicine. We're talking about energy here. We're talking about memories and feelings. Like, that's not a thing where you can plug your finger into a reader and go, you have a 9.865 degree of pain from your past traumas. No, like, trauma is trauma. If somebody breaks up with you and you're hyperventilating, like as a teenager, that's trauma on the nervous system, but it's micro trauma. It's life. We all have wear and tear on our nervous system. And so whether it's getting in a car accident or going to combat, or, your dad beating you, or somebody raping you, like, trauma is trauma to the nervous system. And you can't like point a finger and say, this guy is trauma, this girl doesn't. So yes, this medicine, not only does it treat for PTSD, most people have PTSD, they have addictions, they have depression, they have some sort of trauma in their childhood. There's so much of this thing. It's our lives. The whole nervous system is basically a program that's been designed or been built. And, so that I think there's great value to this. It's not addictive. It creates neuroplasticity. Like, this stuff really does work, but you have to use it with intention. That's the difference.
Yeah, and I would have two questions for this, for it, Tommy. Is number one, we've seen a rise in youth suicide. Since 2007, youth suicide has gone up every single year. And I don't think it's a coincidence that 2007 is the first year we had a smartphone. But I think that social media and stuff has put a different strain on. I know just last year, one of the kids in my son's grade in high school killed himself over a breakup of a bad relationship. Mm-hmm. This year, my other son had a child in their grade that killed themselves over something else. And there's something that I don't remember ever hearing about as a kid growing up in school. I mean, you heard about rare cases of it. This has become crazy. So yeah. Is there an age restriction? And would kids under 18 be able to take this stuff? And the other question is, how long after the trauma are we talking about treatment? Because we seem to be saying things that happened in the past when you were a kid or when you were in combat. How soon after the trauma would you be able to take the psychedelics to help you start coping with this stuff? Well,
one of the reasons why we switched from morphine to ketamine in the field is because of that. So we give ketamine now instead of morphine because it's a dissociative anesthesia. It's a horse tranquilizer. Ketamine is now the number one multi-billion-dollar company or industry that's been legal to do these psychedelic experiments. That's the first one. Then the next one will be MDMA. The next one after that will be psilocybin, and then LSD. And when LSD arrives the right way, like it should have in 1945, that one is really going to do a lot of good. But it's important that people understand that we are building the protocols right now. We are the guinea pigs. My community, the Special Forces community, MMA fighters, Wall Street guys, high egotistical jobs, high drive people that kind of led astray. Like, that's who this thing works on the best because the program is wound up the tightest. So yeah, for kids, I mean, we've treated down in Mexico and Costa Rica, we've treated, relationships, dad, sons. I can't tell you how many dad-son relationships have healed from this stuff, or mom-daughter. The dosages change. It's just like any other medicine. I mean, you go to Africa and they've been using ibogaine as a tribal medicine through their whole lifetime as a community. That's what they do. And that's how we got ibogaine, which is the number one addiction treatment in the world. Heroin, alcohol, smoking, all of it. So yeah, it can help, but I don't think it's for everyone. I have to say that because people say, well, it's just your perspective. But I would say that if you're dealing with something, and especially if you're thinking about taking your life, well, this is another great alternative because you don't have to really die. You might die in the medicine, but you don't have to take your life. We have help. It's here.
Man, it sounds so promising, and I pray to God that everything that I have heard about it is true. I mean, I know that there's some people out there that are so many doubters. I know a lot more has to happen here before we see it at a mainstream level. But and thankfully that you guys are the guinea pigs and are going through this testing and stuff. So hopefully it could be a benefit to our society, not just in the Special Forces community, but to our culture at large. And I want to bring it back then to you here, Tommy. What kind of advice would you say now, given the fact that I know everybody's situation is different, but what kind of, if you could do it all over again in a sense, maybe, or if there's a dad out there listening that's just on the onset of this type of situation, a divorce, a co-parenting situation, what would you tell that dad?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I wasn't, I would say to any male out there, I would say, do not take a woman or a partner as your mate unless you really, truly know who you are and love yourself. Because until you do that, you're really not capable of loving someone else. You have to start with the self. And I knew that that's kind of very theoretical, because life happens. But that would be the number one. Number two is if you're in a relationship and it is toxic, and I know the church is, the church is very about keeping the family together, and I am too. But sometimes that family is the cancer that the kids are dealing with. And I think we have to look at that from a very non-emotional, non-biased perspective and go, what is better for these kids? Can the parents coexist as partners and love each other and be amicable and respectable, respectful to each other and create that environment? Is that better than being in a relationship and being completely toxic? That's not for me to decide.
Yeah, well said, Tommy. And we have, I harp on it. We have so many kids that are growing up without that father in the home, and then we have no heavenly father in our society anymore. God's been taken out of our schools, out of everywhere that we look, and it's. I think those two things combined are the biggest number one social issues that we have in our country. And I think if we got them two things together, I think most of our problems would just really start to go away, medicine or not. I think if we had kids that had more dads connected to them and in their homes and in their lives and be present, not just dads that are just there, but dads that are present and that show up and are doing the right thing. I mean, there's no supplement for that. And I think it would just, so many of our issues would really go away quickly.
Yeah, I agree. I don't say this with judgment. And I work with a lot of men or talk to guys that have that ability to be in their kid's life and they don't. And it's hard for me not to be judgmental, because I would do a lot to see them, but I can't. So, if you have an opportunity to do so, don't think about the pain, think about the direction that you can envision one day with your kids and that relationship. Just keep going there in your mind and stop thinking about the past in the direction you want to go with your kids. And I think that will give guys a lot of strength to keep, and it's not easy, because like, I know my ex-wife was, they don't make them any darker than that. But, it's, you got to do what you got to do. And most importantly, you got to take care of yourself too. If you love yourself and you're like on that road of finding that, then, you're more likely that relationship's going to come back into your life.
Yeah, great stuff, Tommy. And I know that I can hear it in your voice. I know the passion that you have for your kids and being a dad. And I know that so many dads listening will connect with you. And I'm grateful the fact that you're talking about it openly and honestly, because it will help dads that are out there going into these similar situations. And like I said, I get no more messages than that. Dads that are going through these difficult times. So I appreciate you speaking on it. I know that you're involved in a lot of different things. I know you're a musical guy. You're a movie documentary guy here. Besides all the stuff that you've done for the country and for us here and for our freedom. But what are you working on right now? What kind of projects are you working on? What's coming up for you here?
Well, yeah, a couple of documentaries about the medicine and how it's impacting our community, the veteran community specifically, but also with addictions and mental illness. I have been writing some music. I was kind of a life coach for an up-and-coming singer-songwriter for the last 9 months. Or 10 months. And he was out the streets of Memphis, was in jail, wrote his songs, found God. But he had a whole life of addiction, starting at 12 years old, doing cocaine with his mom's boyfriends. And so, we had a lot of work to do. And I used a lot of the work that I've done with the men in our NSW families on him. And it really did come down to the identity. It was really the work, the self-work. I call it the neurological programming, the I am statement. Jesus said, I am the I am. Well, that neurologically says a lot, because what we do is we tell ourselves, I am fill in the blank. I am lazy. I am fat. I am ugly. I am no good. I am a cheater. I'm. So that attacks your noun that's who you are. So there's an identity issue. And I really think, besides from the fatherless home, we have an identity crisis in our culture, because we're trying to show the world who we are, and that's not who we are. And it gets heavy, like for me, like I created these personas to get out validation: state champ wrestler, NCAA soccer player, all, whatever, all that crap. It was just get that drug of dopamine, I think, of affirmation. And it's when I lost that I had to face, and that for the first time in my life at 38, it's like 4 years ago, I recognized that I didn't know who I was. I was just being who I wanted the world to see. And I think there's some of that's never really going to go away because we're human beings, but it sure as hell reset my perspective on that. And when I started to be myself, like creative storyteller and helping people, that's who I am. And my life has taken off because of that.
It's so important, Tommy. And I know, just like you said there, that I am works in every direction. So it's like God says, I am the light, I am the darkness. I wound, I heal. I kill, I make alive, and none can be delivered out of my hand. So it's you have it either direction. So it's how you choose to use it. And so many people, because I think social media creates this fallacy of people's lives that they're trying to live up to or create this path that's really not them. And man, it's having a big problem in our society as well, too. So.
Yeah, I mean, what do you do to a kid that's he's coming into the world going, okay, I'm a boy, that's my role model, and I watch him and I watch that, and now, oh shoot, if I don't get that girl or make that varsity team or go to this college or become this profession, that my worth is affected by that. And I'm not saying we're all driven egotistically like that. There's a lot of good that that drive to do, like for me, be a SEAL or whatever, like that wasn't all bad. There was a lot of good, but we just have to be more aware of, I believe, if we're active in the spirit or in the flesh, and that's, Christian language, but that, that's kind of how I look at it. It's like, you have a choice what you want to leave behind in this world, what energy, people say, well, thank you for your service. And I'm like, I love serving because I get dopamine. I get affirmation from it. When I help someone, I feel like $1 million. So like, if there's any identity to have outside who you are, it's probably that, helping people. But even that, like I used to say, I am love. That was my meditation, my prayer, my cadence when I was running. I'm love. But then I thought, I'm human, and that's all, both the bad and the good, And so I just said, I am. And that's, they say Yahweh is the breath, and Xing Yahweh is the breath. So fascinating.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. I'm going to drop a link in the podcast description here to your Instagram account, so people can get over there, check you out, find out more about you. I'm going to try to put a bow on this here because I'm running up against it. Last thing I want to hit you with, I love to ask all the dads that I get on the podcast here, what type of advice do you have for that new dad or for that about to be father who's out there listening?
Be present. And we don't have all the answers. If you're a new dad, just enjoy the journey and the mistakes and the failures. Enjoy the moment, because if you put your head on the end state, you're going to miss everything.
I love the message. It's been an honor for me. I got to say, Tommy Aceto, you're a first-class father all the way, and thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time here on First Class Fatherhood.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
You have been listening to First Class Fatherhood. First Class Fatherhood is a family-made media podcast. Please visit www.firstclassfatherhood.com or www.familymade.com to find out more details. You can order First Class Fatherhood advice and wisdom from high-profile dads on Amazon.com or wherever books are sold. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. Proverbs 22:6 tells us, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will never depart from it. God bless, and I'll catch you next time.